Basketball isn't fair. Imagine I told you that there was a prospect. Not just any prospect, he was the best player in his state. McDonald's All-American, widely regarded as one of the best players in the country. The prospect had unlimited bounce, explosiveness that you'd see out of a high-flying NBA player. When he got to the rim, he was able to finish through contact at a high rate. And not only that, that prospect shoots a three-point shot at a high clip, on top of having a great frame at 6'4", 220. Did he go big-time D1? Yeah, he went big-time D1. He was one of the best players in his conference, in the ACC. He would even go on to get drafted in the first round. You would think that that prospect would be a perennial all-star player. But guess what? Basketball just isn't fair. There are so many factors on who gets to be a guy that sticks in the league, who gets to be a guy that's an NBA All-Star, who's the guy that's a future Hall of Famer. In the case of Lonnie Walker, literally the prospect that I just described, he got the NBA chances, but then eventually had to do his time overseas. And guess what? That's not an L. We're gonna take a deep dive into Lonnie Walker's basketball journey and how him coming overseas may have saved his career. But first, I gotta say thank you guys for all the love that I've been receiving on my previous videos. Even though we're growing at a fast rate, we are still a small channel, so please stop what you're doing, find that subscribe button, and hit that subscribe button right now. Help a brother out, because we got big dreams. We're trying to get to 10K by February, and I think we could do it. And without further ado, let's skip the boring stuff and get right back to the video. Lonnie Walker was born in Reading, Pennsylvania. Reading is the 4th biggest city in the state, and according to a 2010 census, Reading had the highest share of citizens living in poverty in the nation, among cities with populations exceeding 65,000. And kudos to Lonnie, because he does a lot of great things, charity work within his community, giving back to the less fortunate, because nobody knows about that struggle more than Lonnie. His dad was somewhat of a superstar in those neighborhoods. Lonnie Walker III played for Alvernia University, recording over 1,000 points and 1,000 rebounds. As I mentioned before, he's well known throughout Reading, and a lot of times early on in Lonnie IV's childhood, he would get approached by people in the neighborhood that used to play with his pops. They used to stop him and say, yo, your pops was a monster, bro. That's the legacy that I think every basketball player can be proud of. But it was at Reading High School where Lonnie Walker IV pretty much became a star in the city, escaping the shadows that his dad left in his basketball career. Now, obviously, Lonnie is the 4th Lonnie Walker. So just to clear up any confusion, I'm gonna call Lonnie Walker IV by his childhood name, which is Buddha. As a freshman, Buddha averaged 8 points a game, playing every single game. Then as a sophomore, he doubled his average to about 16.9 points per game. And as a junior, he stayed right around that mark, but crossing that 17-point barrier. But it was his senior year where he really had that standout campaign that pretty much locked him in as one of the best players in the state and the country. In his senior year, he was voted a McDonald's All-American. He was Mr. Basketball in Pennsylvania, pretty much staying around the same career average as he did the previous 2 seasons. He was at 18.4 points per game, and he surpassed former NBA player Donyell Marshall as Reading High School's all-time leading scorer with a total of 1,828 total points scored. He brought a state championship to the city, and he left the city in fashion. Buddha would earn an athletic scholarship to go hoop at the University of Miami, choosing that school over the likes of Kentucky, Arizona, Syracuse, and Villanova. Pretty much every school wanted a piece of Buddha. Now, it is funny that last week's video featured the likes of Cam Reddish, another Pennsylvania All-Star player, and they actually played on the same AAU team in team final. But I say it's funny because there's a lot of similarities between the stories of Reddish and Walker. For example, when they both were in high school, they were the man. They did everything. Like I said in the beginning, Lonnie Walker pretty much had what every player would want to have. You got the bounce, you got the athleticism, and you can shoot. On the surface, that looks like you're going to be able to play wherever you want, however you want, because that's what every team is looking for. However, there's another element to it, that when a player possesses those skills, when they show those flashes and that high upside, people start to get a little bit overzealous. And when I say that, I mean, you're looking at a player that is already good enough to play at, like I said, pretty much any college and eventually pretty much any NBA program. You got all the tools possible. But then people want to say, you know what? You have a high upside. You can take it to a whole nother level if you just add a shimmy, step back, jump shot. And it's like, no. You don't necessarily need that, okay? More people, more teams are looking for players that just do what I just explained. Shoot, finish, and the third element of that is you got to play defense. When Buddha goes to Miami, it's funny because he ends up playing with a player by the name of Bruce Brown. And Bruce Brown is comparable to Buddha because he is pretty athletic, not as athletic as Buddha. He can kind of shoot, can't shoot as good as Buddha, but Bruce Brown wasn't necessarily looked at as that guy with the high upside. So he's more susceptible to just accept who he is, right? Because he wasn't a one and done player. He was returning back his sophomore year when Lonnie Walker IV came in. He wasn't a projected lottery pick, right? So you kind of figure, all right, this is who I am. And together at Miami, Lonnie Walker and Bruce Brown pretty much made magic happen. They led their team to a 22-10 record, 11-7, good for third in the ACC. They had some big wins. Those guys were playing lights out basketball, and they were able to share the spotlight. If you look at their stats side by side, you really couldn't tell who was the better player on paper. Lonnie was putting up 11-3-2. Bruce Brown was putting up 11-7-4. Now, the funny thing about the 3-2 rebounds and assists versus the 7-4 rebounds and assists that Bruce Brown was putting up was anything Bruce Brown was capable of, Lonnie Walker is probably capable of doing more. All right, Bruce Brown just kind of wanted to do more, and that's why he was able to produce. But it didn't matter because, like I said before, Lonnie had that upside. And I'm done calling him Buddha because that feels weird to call him a childhood name when I don't know him as a child. So he's back to Lonnie. After the season, they both would declare for the NBA draft. But before they would realize their dreams, Lonnie gave one of the more stranger interviews, pre-draft interviews that you'd see out of a young prospect. He made headlines for talking about some wild conspiracies about giants and somebody that I'm not going to say his name, but let's just say his name rhymes with Spittler. In one of the strangest pre-draft quotes you will ever see, Lonnie went on to say, one of my favorite ones is actually the whole blank thing, with him supposedly dying, him and his wife. Just that whole allegations. I just feel as a great, powerful leader, there's no that way you were by yourself in a house where you died, or whatever it shall be. It just doesn't add up. And the only reason I bring that up is because where he landed, where Lonnie ended up going, I don't think something like this was a turnoff for them. Whereas I think 30 teams might have looked at a quote like that and say, hey man, where's this kid's head at? But in the 2018 NBA draft, Lonnie Walker was selected 18 overall to the San Antonio Spurs. At the time, Greg Popovich had just lost Tim Duncan, and it was really the end of a dynasty and time to hit that rebuild button. Guys like Lonnie Walker were called upon to kind of be that new phase of the Spurs. I mean, I remember thinking when I saw Lonnie's tape at the time, saying that, yo, this guy plays completely different than anything I remember Pop producing. And I was always curious about how it was going to turn out. And Pop is the kind of guy that embraces the free thinker, the weird guy. Like, I just think about Tim Duncan, and he was such like a basketball version of a hippie that like that's kind of what Pop kind of gravitates towards. And even Lonnie Walker said that Pop told him that he reminded Pop of Manu. So it seemed like he was in the perfect place. And when you look at how the roster was put together at that time, it really was Lonnie's perfect chance to go out and make a name for himself as a rookie. Clearly, he was going to be playing minutes behind DeMar DeRozan, but the roster was pretty big heavy, and there was going to be a lot of other minutes at other guard positions or wing positions available. But his rookie season got off to a tough start because on October 6, 2018, he was diagnosed with a medial meniscus tear, and that pretty much held him out until November 25th when the Spurs assigned him to the G League team. He didn't end up making his NBA debut until January 3rd, 2019, and at that point he was just thrown right into the thick of things. There's only so much you can do in that position. You don't really get the full preseason. You don't really get to feel your way into the NBA. You're just kind of plopped into a game and expected to do good because you're a rookie, and we took you in the first round. Walker ended up scoring 3 points and grabbing 1 rebound in only 5 minutes of play. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until 1 whole year later where he would actually look like he belonged in the NBA. He had his legs back under him. He was finally fully healthy, had a whole offseason and preseason to prepare. And on December 3rd, 2019, Lonnie Walker scored his career-high 28 points, including 19 points in the fourth quarter in a 135-133 double overtime win against the Houston Rockets. But over the course of the next few years, the reality of the NBA started to kick in. The Spurs ended up drafting so many guards that ended up being really good players after they took Lonnie, and naturally that gives him less opportunities for him to show himself that he's worth the NBA minutes. I'm talking about guys like Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, on top of having guys like DeJounte Murray and Derek White. All those players are legitimate guys that not only do they produce on the court and were objectively getting better numbers than Lonnie, but more importantly, they were guys that already had their roles defined. Now, the reason why I brought up Bruce Brown, and let's go back to his college days at Miami real quick. Bruce Brown was taken 42nd in the same NBA draft. Nobody expected anything out of him. All he did was play his role. Because he doesn't have that high upside, there's no pressure on having a bag and becoming this big time scorer that every team only has one or two of. There's a lot more spaces, there's a lot more opportunities for you to play as a role player, not only in the NBA, but pretty much any team in basketball, right? If there's any young kids watching this, this is the part where I really want you guys to screen record this part right now. More teams are looking for role players, people that understand who they are, people that bring a definitive thing to the court, to the team, day in and day out. If you're a guy that can score 20 points on Monday, and we got a game on Wednesday and you're only good for 10, and then we got a game on Friday and you're still only good for 10, then you're not as valuable to the team because you're not a definitive 20-point scorer per game kind of guy. It's so much harder to be that guy than it is to just be the guy that just plays his role. I find it very interesting that Bruce Brown pretty much has the career that Lonnie should have. Lonnie should be the guy to be signing $100 million contracts. A glorified role player would have been perfectly fine for a guy like that. Now, could you get the Adidas endorsement, and could you get the commercials, and could you get the jersey sales? Probably not. Nobody's buying a Bruce Brown jersey. But guess what? Bruce Brown is always going to have a job in the NBA. He's won with Jokic. I think that's a great test for NBA players, especially guards and wings. Could you look good with Jokic? Would Jokic want to play with you? Because he's the ultimate team player. And Bruce Brown is a Jokic guy, right? Jokic can pretty much make anybody look good. But if you don't play the right way and you're trying to do, more than needed, then you're not going to look good with Jokic. He's not going to want to play with you. Lonnie Walker needed to be a Jokic guy, not necessarily a this is my team and I'm going to put the weight on my shoulders kind of guy. And I think that's how you can sum up his NBA stint. Now, he went on to play for other teams, Brooklyn and the LA Lakers and Boston, but he would always have quotes very similar to his boy Cam Reddish that would always talk about, I need to get back to myself. He talked about his stint in LA as a way for me to bet on myself and I can get back to myself. And what they're really saying is, I want to be the man again. Maybe you wasn't meant to be the man in the NBA. That's completely fine. Because if you play your cards right, and this is all for Lonnie, this is a great teaching moment for other players. If you play your cards right, you can probably make more money being who they want you to be on the basketball court when you get to that level. Of course, when you're young and you're the most dominant player, dominate, bro. Go ahead, average 30. If you can average 30, average 30. I think you should be averaging 30 until you can't average 30, but I digress. On October 30th, 2024, Lonnie Walker came overseas to play professional basketball in Lithuania, signing with the historic club Zalgiris. If you watched my last video on Cam Reddish, you know that Cam went to the same league as Lonnie, the Lithuanian LKL. And if you hadn't watched that video, go ahead and find that video after this one because it's phenomenal. Objectively, of course. But Lonnie was not only playing in the domestic league of Lithuania, he was also participating in the Euro League, which is a collective of all the best European teams, which forms a super league that's essentially the best league outside of the NBA. Yes, it's probably a lot better than the G League. But overseas, it's all about fit. How do you fit within the country? How do you fit within the coaching? How do you fit within the culture? When Lonnie first came to Lithuania, much like Cam, they had this big scoring reputation. We've never actually seen Lonnie be a full-time volume scorer, but he always had the skill. So when he came over, he passed the eye test with flying colors. Bro was catching bodies. Fast breaks were looking like NBA Jam Volume 2. The EuroLeague social media team was in a frenzy because every game he would give you some highlight-worthy posts. Even me, sometimes when I didn't watch the games, I would just watch the highlights and I'm like, yo, Lonnie was killing. However, for some reason, the information always gets back to me. People always want to tell me what actually is going on because You know, you can have one perception of a country or a league or a team, but unless you're on the inside, unless you're in that city, unless you're on that team or affiliated with that club, you really have no idea what's going on. And the word that got back to me regarding his stint in Žalgiris was Lonnie didn't fit with the basketball philosophy of the Lithuanian coach. The head coach that he was playing for at Žalgiris was a man by the name of Andrea Trinchieri. He's a legendary Italian coach that believes that his way of basketball is the right way to play. If you don't know anything about Italian basketball, they believe in two-way players. Now, when most NBA guards come and sign to play overseas, that's the one aspect of hoops that they forget or they just overlook. You have to buy into new defensive schemes. You have to now play full court defense. Not only are you taking the pressure of a smaller defender that all he wants to do is play defense and deal with that, bringing the ball up the court and initiating offense, but you have to reciprocate the same energy to them when they're bringing the ball up the court and making their life a living hell. So if you ask me, there's nothing that Lonnie did wrong offensively. He was capable of having the big game at any given point, having the big play that energizes the crowd, but defensively is where he just didn't fit in with the Žalgiris team. And that is where a lot of people poke holes in his overseas stint, the first one. But I want you to check out his scouting report. Coming out of college, look what they said about his defensive abilities. He has all the physical tools needed to be a 3-and-D guy and play a major role for an NBA team, but will have to learn to embrace that role. He will likely need time to adjust to not having the ball in his hands. And to me, that pretty much sums up Lonnie Walker's playing career, not only in the NBA, but also overseas. It's a conscious decision that needs to be made. They're bringing you in. When you're coming from Miami, they're seeing, yes, you gave flashes. Yes, you probably had a nice step back jumper. Yes, you probably were a bucket getter, but you averaged 11 points as a 6'4" guard that jumps out the gym. That's the perfect opportunity to turn your game around and just be the off-ball cutter, 3-and-D guy, Bruce Brown. So inconsistent defense led to inconsistent playing time, led to inconsistent numbers, and Lonnie pretty much had an up and down stint in Žalgiris. But nonetheless, on February 19th, he parted ways with the team in order to return back to the NBA. Thus being his second stint, he was 1 year older, 1 year wiser, and he had another year under his belt of just playing different ball. Sometimes that makes you a better player. Think about the guys that compete for Team USA. When they play in the Olympics and they're playing against different schemes and different rules and different basketball, different three-point line, all that stuff, when they come back to the NBA, they all have great seasons. It's just nice to just diversify your portfolio as a hooper. He would return back to Pennsylvania and sign with the Philadelphia 76ers. And he put numbers up. In 20 appearances, he made 7 starts, good for 12.4 points per game, 3.2 rebounds per game, and 2.5 assists. And don't get me wrong, he pretty much did what he was supposed to do. They brought him in to get buckets. But after the 2025 season, the 76ers declined to exercise their team option on his contract, making him an unrestricted free agent. And that would pretty much lead into the summer, where on July 24th, 2025, Walker signed a very lucrative 2-year deal with the Maccabi Tel Aviv. And that's where I say that coming overseas is not always an L. Sometimes you have to think, what do you want out of basketball? You're talking about multi-million-dollar contracts to play in a foreign country and get treated like royalty wherever you go. That cannot be considered an L when that's what that person wanted to do. If a person does want to maximize the basketball side of it, then yeah, you may need to go the other route. I said this in my last video. You're an independent contractor. Lease out your game. Take your emotions, take your ego out of your game and say, this is what you guys think of me. All right, I'm gonna just do that. But it really depends on the person. Which way do you want to go? If you were in this position where you can make good money in a great situation, playing the game the way that you want to play it, or you can commit to a whole different style of play, something that you might not be fully comfortable with doing, but something that can put you on a bigger platform, a bigger team, a higher budget. Which one are you choosing? Think about it and let me know in the comments. I'm very interested to hear what you guys would choose. There's really no wrong answer, but if it's me, I'm choosing the other way because I don't look at my basketball game with big emotions attached to it. But that doesn't mean that that's the only answer. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. And like I said before, if you guys are not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button right now. And until next Sunday, I'm your boy Chip Overseas. Peace.